joining a little bit later. In addition to that, because this was an additional time that we added on, some people might actually try and just watch the recording at a later time. But we will just go ahead and say that we're so thankful that Jennifer Wheeler from the Texas Real Estate Commission is with us today as the Director of Education and Licensing. She has a wealth of knowledge and information, and she's been a friend to Texas Realtors across the state and making sure that we have quality education that they can take. And so we're so glad, Jennifer, that you are with us today. I want to cover a little bit about the meeting logistics, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we can continue to flow freely and make sure that we're done by the top of the hour at 2 o'clock. So Jennifer does have a presentation based upon some of the questions that you guys had previously asked, and so she will be covering that. If in the middle of the presentation, Jennifer, if it's okay with you, we might just get them to either text in or chat in their questions and we can aggregate them and ask them at the end, or alternatively, they can actually unmute at the end and then ask the questions at a time. So that way you have a chance to make your presentation and then we can dialogue afterward, either by the Zoom chat or by asking the questions, if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely. And if you don't mind just kind of monitoring that chat and giving me a heads up, then.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we will definitely do so. So at this time, we can go ahead and turn it over to you, knowing full well that probably Zoom is not your primary platform. And so if you do have any questions or technical difficulties, we're around to help by all means. But yes, we will check and monitor the chat for you and ask the questions later. In addition to that, they might also have their own questions that they can ask whenever we get to that time of the presentation, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, at this point, we'll go ahead and just turn it over to you. Thanks.
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And yes, John, you're right. Zoom is not my primary platform. We at the Real Estate Commission have been using Teams. And so I'm much more savvy with Teams. So yes, please bear with me if I have any technical difficulties. I think, for the most part, they all operate pretty similarly. But yeah, feel free to chime in if you notice any technical difficulties that I may not notice right away. I did prepare a PowerPoint slideshow presentation. I really appreciate you all sending questions to John so that he could get those to me before this meeting. Really helps me kind of get an idea of what your questions are. And so that was really helpful. So I think I'll just kind of start. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, if I can. And apologies, my allergies are terrible. So when I talk for a long time, I start to get a little raspy. So, all right, here we go. Let me see. Okay, can you all see that? But strangely, it's on the other side of my screen. I'm gonna go backwards. Okay, so, and you can see this? No, okay, thank you. So yes, I am Jennifer Wheeler. I am the Director of Education and Examinations for the Texas Real Estate Commission. I have been with the Commission almost 10 years. And it's been a great experience, and it's been a great experience working with Texas Realtors. So I'm really happy to be here. I understand that probably most of this group are maybe instructors or education providers or are somehow affiliated with real estate education here in Texas, and appreciate everything that you do for real estate education in Texas. Oops, see, interruptions. I wanted to just kind of go over what our purpose is. And, I think we share this. We have this in common with Texas Realtors. Our purpose is to safeguard public interest and protect consumers of real estate services in Texas. We protect consumers by making sure the education providers and courses meet standards established by the statute and by TREC rules. And we have adopted standards that address course content, as well as course design and delivery methods, such as the distinctions between classroom and distance education. And some of you may have been part of that process and been with us as we've gone through those changes over the last 4 or 5 years. And I thought it might be nice for you to see the education team. We've grown significantly over the last several years. So Mike Sample-Deal is our program supervisor. Crystal Stoll is our business process manager. And so she works a lot on the back end of testing. So when we have new requirements, like we'll get to in a little bit, the contracts courses, we want to configure our database system to recognize those courses as they come in. So that's her role. We have a curriculum developer now. That person is Jennifer Gruby, and she kind of leads up our broker responsibility and legal update 1 and 2 writing groups, and also serves the same capacity for non-elective courses for inspectors. And Gwen Jackson, many of you probably know, she's been with the agency for 35 years, I think. And she has recently transitioned into a role as compliance specialist. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then we have 6 education specialists that are dedicated to reviewing your provider applications and your course applications. And I'm sure many of you know many of these people as well. So about 7 or 8 years ago, the education team was made up of about 4 people, and now we've grown to 11 and anticipate growing even more. So just a little bit, you know, again, these are just kind of the basics, what we do in the education division. We review and process initial and renewal applications for qualifying education providers, continuing education providers, qualifying courses, and continuing education courses. And those are across all 3 branches of the agency's umbrella, which is real estate appraisers and inspectors. So we review and approve the qualifying and continuing education providers who seek to offer courses to our current and future license holders. Right now we have 38 qualifying education providers and 570 continuing education providers. And the same goes for courses. We review and approve qualifying and CE courses to ensure they meet the standards that you know, I just mentioned. We currently have 6,200, just over 6,200 courses approved. So that's a lot. People don't always realize how many courses are actually out there. And so those are just kind of the bare bones. And I thought I would share with you a couple of key points for those of you specifically who are preparing course applications for us. Some of the key things that we look for when we are reviewing the qualifying courses is a detailed content. We perform a detailed content review to ensure all the required topics are covered. You guys are familiar with our pre-licensing course approval forms that identify each of the topics that are required for each course. And then what our staff does is review the timed course outline and the course approval form. And what we want to do is be able to tie these 2 things together. So what you have listed in your timed course outline as an amount of time dedicated to a particular topic should also be similar in your course approval form. And that's one of the things that I'll come back to, but that's one of the things we often have a difficult time with when we receive applications. There are inconsistencies there that then require us to have to go back and work with the education provider. So that's just, you know, I'm just mentioning that. A review of the topic quizzes, the scenario-based learning exercises. We review learning management systems for distance education courses. And then another one of the more complex aspects is reviewing the questions, pulling all the questions out of the topic quizzes and the scenario-based learning exercises, and then comparing those with all of the questions in each version of the final exam. Because one of the rules is that questions from quizzes and exercises can't be duplicated, either amongst themselves or on the final exam. So that's one of the more tedious aspects of the course review as well. Some providers have come up with types of spreadsheets that really help us to identify this, that make it the process a little more efficient. And so if that's something you're interested in doing, that's definitely helpful. And then of course we review the instructor manual and the enrollment agreement and the exam proctoring methodology, however you've decided to implement your third-party proctored exams. And then similar, but with a little less scrutiny, we review the continuing education courses, and we want to make sure that the content is relevant to real estate. And for those of you who happened to chime into the ESEC meeting yesterday, you'll know that we are examining the possibility for better defining acceptable course topics. Again, we review the timed course outline and the course topics, any assignments and activities, topic quizzes, and the amount of time dedicated to each of those items. And then of course, a review of the learning management system for our distance education courses. So I will move on. So as I was kind of alluding to, I thought it might be helpful to share some of the common issues that we have when reviewing courses. Obviously, the best case scenario is a course that's submitted to us that doesn't require any additional information, and that's what's best for you too, as an education provider. We want to be as efficient as possible. So again, these are just things I'm sharing with you guys. Maybe they'll be helpful for the person who organizes your course applications. But again, inconsistencies with the course approval form and the timed course outline are fairly common. And so I think it's just, have that extra eagle eye on those things. Another issue is when you're filling out the course approval form, a lot of times, especially for distance education courses, the page or the screenshot number on the course approval form doesn't align with the topic. And so that just requires some extra digging and searching. And then that requires us also to communicate with the provider and, ask for additional information. Again, like I said, the duplicate questions on topic quizzes and final exams, that I know is, it's a heavy ask for our education providers. And I know that. But it is one of the things I think that requires, again, that eagle eye to just really dig in and make sure that those questions aren't duplicative. And then less common, but occasionally, there is insufficient content in the materials to satisfy the 30-hour requirement. So sometimes education providers have to go back and build in a little more content to make sure that there's enough information to reasonably fill a 30-hour course. And then continuing education courses, one of the things that it's been interesting for me when talking with education providers about the acceptability of the topic of the course is that the application itself only asks for a brief description of the course topic. Of course, now we have the requirement for the timed course outline, and so that's really helpful as well. But one of the light bulb moments that I've had with some of our education providers is when I put it in the perspective of, if you are an outside auditor that's not involved in real estate, and your job is to come make sure that that an agency is compliant, then we need to not take anything for granted. So a lot of times, I think people take for granted that we all know each other and we all know this is real estate, but it's the formality of the application that really requires that extra amount of detail that ties it specifically to a real estate topic. So for example, sometimes we get kind of vague references in social media applications, and and they're not obvious to an outside person that they are, specifically gearing the course toward real estate license holders and how they would use a social media app in their profession. So that's just a tip that when you are preparing your applications, just give it a little extra extra time and try to provide a little more detail. And I think you'll see things move more swiftly in your approval process. And so that kind of draws into, you know, the next topic, which is subject matter does not directly support the relevance requirement. And again, we're working on this, and I think that, and I know ESAC is going to address this, and so I think we'll have more clarity. You'll have better clarity and guidelines going forward. And so that's our aim, is to make those things clear. So just a takeaway is take your time. It's okay to take your time because it'll benefit you in the end when we don't have to ask for any additional information. And we want to approve your courses as quickly as you want them approved. So another question that came up is, how do students get credit for courses? So the qualifying courses, anybody who's taking pre-licensing or SAE courses, are typically submitted by the applicant or the license holder, and they're sent to documents@trec.texas.gov. And then on the back end, we have a licensing specialist who pulls from that pool and then data enters all of that course information. Separately, we have a CE posting system for continuing education. And that's where our CE providers are responsible for uploading course records into the CE posting system within 10 days from course completion. So one of the questions that is often raised is, why is there a difference? And technology, for now. It's our obstacle, but it also is what we'll use to make some changes. So the key to the CE posting system is the fact that the individual already has a license number and an applicant doesn't. It makes getting into our database much simpler, even though it is not a simple process. But that's why we have two systems. So what we're looking at, we're starting to delve into a phased approach in allowing education providers to submit qualifying course records as well. And don't panic, it's gonna take a lot of time. But what we're probably, our phase, if you wanna call the CE posting system phase 1, and then an SAE aspect as phase 2, I think that's probably where our next direction is going to be. Because again, the SAE candidate already has a license number, and so the same theory and the same concepts for the programming of the CE posting system can probably support that. So yes, there's a difference. I know it's confusing. And to add to the matter, it's confusing amongst the different license types. So when you start, talking about appraisers and inspectors, they have other methods for submitting course information. And so sometimes if you're a provider that offers multiple specialties of coursework, that can get confusing. So we're working on incorporating inspector continuing ed and appraiser continuing ed into the CE posting system as well. And for any of you who are part of either of those groups, that's on the very near horizon. So, all right. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about, how recommendations get made to the commission and how rules get changed. The key words are education subcommittees. We've got, you're all familiar with ESAC. We have an inspector education subcommittee and an appraiser education subcommittee. So ESAC was authorized by the statute and defined in commission rules. And the group consists of 12 committee members, and they meet quarterly. ESAC's mission was to regularly review and revise curriculum standards and course content requirements for qualifying and continuing education courses. Each education subcommittee meets quarterly. These meetings are open to the public if you don't know that already. And we always encourage education providers and course instructors to attend and offer feedback to the committees as recommendations for changes to the education policies and rules are considered. This is really important, and I think a lot of people aren't, we have some key players that are regularly in attendance of the ESAC and other subcommittee meetings. But I really want to get the message out that if you are interested, if you want to be a part of the discussions that lead to changes, please join these meetings. We have a great group of the ESAC committee members, and they always welcome feedback from any members of the public who attend those meetings. So just a word of encouragement. There's room for you at the table for that discussion. All right, everybody wants to know about the contract courses. The when is February 1, 2021. We will be requiring 3 hours of contract-related courses as part of the 18 hours of traditional continuing education for our license holders. And that discussion sparked from, and came out of ESAC, sparked from a discussion of problems arising from the misuse of contract forms in the industry. And so again, with protecting consumers, consumer protection in mind, that's where all of this was kind of born. It was lengthy discussions over the course of several ESAC meetings, probably at least a year, maybe more, before the recommendation was finally made to the commission and the rule was just recently adopted. So I can't remember what my next slide says. Okay. So this is how a lot of people are asking, what's going to happen? What if I'm an education provider and I have courses approved on the topic, I have courses already approved on the topic of contracts. So here's what's going to happen. You will not need to resubmit those courses to us. However, we will develop a form. In fact, it's in its final stages for you to use to request that we review your course for the contracts requirement. So it'll be a pretty simple, straightforward form, but we do need to have something that's kind of formal that you can send to us to instigate that review process. Then on the back end, we'll go in, because everything that we do requires programming changes. And we're going to go in on the back end and identify that course in our records management system as a contracts course, so that when your license holders go to look at their license renewal status on our website, much like you can already see if you have satisfied your legal update requirements or your broker responsibility requirements, you'll be able to see if you've satisfied your contract requirements. And then of course, if you're an education provider and you want to submit new courses to us, we are modifying our CE course application form to give you a space to say, hey, this is a contracts course. I want you to review it based on that standard. So those two things we aim to have available to you by September 1st, so that you can, get a jump on things and, we can just start working through all of those processes well before the February 21st effective date. And let's see, I think that's about it. I imagine that some of you will have questions on that, and we can address them toward the end of the meeting. COVID update, of course. mid-March, we transitioned everybody to working remotely very quickly and very successfully. I think we were all blown away. Prior to COVID, we were just discussing what it would take to get some of our staff working remotely. And, you know, but this just launched it, and we've had great success. So the license application extensions have been applied through July 31st. Many questions have been asked about, will there be any further extensions? And there are none planned at this time. So, yeah, so no further extensions will be granted at this time. But if you have a particularly difficult situation that needs special consideration, then you're welcome to email us, and we'll talk to you on a case-by-case basis. And another question I received was, how is COVID and remote working impacting our ability to process applications within our targeted timeframes? And I think we've been very successful in that regard. If any of you have experienced otherwise, please feel free to reach out to me. And this wasn't a question, but I did want to add it because in March of 2019, we initiated the phase 1 of our compliance audit. Many of you who are continuing education providers have probably heard from Gwen Jackson. She has been doing website compliance reviews, extensive website compliance reviews, and to date has done 154 of our CE providers and 30 qualifying education providers. We have found that everybody has been so gracious in working with us, and we've been able to do a lot of work. I think we've been able to provide a lot of clarity to our education providers. And again, I just would reiterate how helpful and cooperative the education providers on the other end of these compliance audits have been. We will be moving into phase 2 of which is the administrative basically office operations and course audits of qualifying education providers. And our anticipated launch date for that is January of 2021. So many of you have been, have heard us talk about the audit program for the last 2 years. And so I just thought it might be helpful to give you an update. And also I wanted to highlight the fact that if you were the recipient of one of Gwen's compliance audits, it is not because you did something wrong. It is because you had a license renewal, and that's how we're timing the compliance audits. So I do just want to say thank you to everybody who's been so helpful and cooperative. Another question we received was about complaints and violations. And so I thought I'd throw in a couple of things, couple of highlights to help you stay out of, or I guess better said, stay in compliance and without violations. So one of the issues that we see on a somewhat regular basis are courses being offered after they have expired. So helpful tip, I don't know how you have your organization set up, but if you have some method of calendaring and tracking the expiration dates for your courses, I think that can help avoid any of those issues. It's not uncommon for us to get CE course records after the 10-day course completion deadline. That puts an extra burden on staff who could otherwise be reviewing courses when we have to take the time to manually data enter those records. So making sure you're on time with submitting course completion records through the CE posting system would be very helpful. And then if you have somebody, maybe you have your own regulatory compliance person on staff and have that person regularly review your website to ensure content is current and accurate. So again, those are just some tips that I'm sharing with you based on, our experience with the types of complaints and violations that we get. And hopefully that helps. So that's about everything that I have for you. And I wanted to ask you, how can we better serve you? And what questions do you have for me? And I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as people start to compile their questions and formulate their thoughts, we did have two that came in. One is fairly simple, and one might be a little bit more convoluted. So we'll start with a simple one. Mike Crowley from San Antonio asked if we can potentially share your slides with the people who are participating in this session today. Would you mind if we share your slides?
No, not at all.
Wonderful.
Should I email it to you or?
Yeah, if you want to email it to us, we can definitely pass it out to everybody, so that way you don't have to try and find everybody. We'll send it out.
Okay.
And then the second question is a little bit more convoluted. So with this whole contracts course thing, there might be times and circumstances where there's a course that might sound like it is compliant with the contracts approval system, but it's not actually approved. Is there any kind of verbiage or terminology that is going to be in place so that way the person taking the class knows that it will actually comply with the contracts requirement versus it's just a course that happens to have the term contracts in it?
That's a good question, and I should have included that. So part of the back-end programming that we're doing and why we want to get this launched, as soon as possible, is because as your license holders, our license holders search TREC for approved CE courses, they will be able to search by, in the same way that you can search for a legal update course or a broker responsibility course, you'll be able to search by contracts. So that means that we've already reviewed it, determined it was contracts, solely contracts related, and then we identify it with, on the back end, a modifier. But that's what would then show on the website.
Perfect. That sounds great. So that way we know and they know, and there's a central location we can find out or readily access what classes are currently compliant as of that day.
Right. In fact,
perfect.
Let's see, I'm going to look at something real quick.
Jennifer?
Yes.
I'm sure this question is going to come up, so I'm going to go ahead. At what point will someone's contracts course count? Is the start date going to be February 1st? So you know what I'm saying?
Anybody who, yeah. And it's sometimes a little complicated to answer that question. So hopefully I can be pretty clear. But anybody who renews their license prior to the last day of January will not be required to take that course. And I'm sorry, last day of February. January. See, I get confused. But that's why we want to have all the courses available ahead of time also. So if you're on time and you're renewing your license prior to the effective date of the rule, then it won't apply to you, even if your license expires in February. Let's say my license expires in February, but I'm going to go ahead and renew it in January because I have 90 days prior to my expiration date to renew, then I won't have to take the contracts course. But if I wait until February to renew my license or any time after, then I will be required to take the contract course.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is if they took an approved contracts course in January, that counts.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start tracking those as soon as they're out there. So, we'll get the application and the forms out in September, and I imagine you'll start seeing them on people's course completion records, within weeks maybe, depending on how soon they want to jump on it. But
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
what I was wondering, is if they were going to be approved and counted before the February date, because I know that there's a lot of people that, wait to the last minute to take classes, and then there's some that don't, that take things
Right.
earlier. So I just wanted to make sure that the classes that we get approved would count towards their license renewal at that time.
Absolutely. No penalty
Thank you.
for
Appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so in light of that, I do have another question. So with the, you said there's a central location that they can go to find whether or not the course is compliant. I think it'd be super helpful if we actually send that out to our license holders, so that way they know that they can actually go check, because maybe they've already taken one, or maybe they think they've taken one and come to find out it's not actually approved or will be approved. So is that already or will be existing on your website?
So let me share my screen with you again, if I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is our search tool for searching for education for CE courses. Do you see this? These are the filters here. Filters offered by course, broker responsibility. If I just want to see who offers broker responsibility online, as I do that, it automatically auto-populates the providers who offer online broker responsibility. And let's say I don't want online anymore, I want classroom. And so then it takes me to the list of providers who offer. And then of course, each one of these has a drop down. And so you can see. So when the contracts requirements, part of what we're in the last phases of testing is to add contracts to this list of filters. And so that'll pick up on any courses that have been approved to satisfy the contracts requirement. So I want to take you, and I'm not as quick to get to this place. It's more of a licensing page, but I think it might help.
And as you're navigating that way, I'll ask really fast.
Sure.
And your assumption is that the filter will probably be there sometime in September or October?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
How many of you, okay. Does anybody want to volunteer a license number?
I have so many numbers stuck in my head, I'm not sure I can pick any one of them just to throw out there.
Well, I would use mine, but mine's inactive, so I don't think it really.
Zero 42900.
Okay, hold on. Say that again.
0429
Uh-huh.
900.
Oh. Well, maybe I'm not on the right page. Where you go to check your renewal status. Oh, you know what? Because you have to be within 90 days of your license expiration date. So anyway, there's a page that you can go to when you are within 90 days of your license expiration date. And it tells you whether or not you've satisfied the legal update requirements. If you are subject to the broker responsibility, it tells you if you have satisfied that requirement. And it will also show you if you have satisfied your contracts course requirement. So I apologize that I took you down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I don't access that page very often. And yeah, I just realized that you have to be within 90 days of your expiration date to see what I was trying to show you.
Yeah, and no worries. I mean, we all know that it's a very helpful tool. I think a lot of people, it's really very beneficial to license holders to know exactly what is needed. So I think we're all fairly familiar with that page for sure.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. I have a couple more questions, and admittedly, they're kind of all over the place. And so I was trying to formulate them together, but this might be a little jumping from one to another. This is something that I remember it was actually a bit of a conversation in ESEC a time or two ago, but at times it is, when we're submitting classes to the Real Estate Commission for review and approval, it seems like we have one standard with one individual and maybe a different standard with a different individual. And is there a mechanism or a plan or expectations of consistency in the way that different people review the courses as they move forward?
That's really good feedback. And can you give me some examples or an example?
Well, I can tell you from our standpoint, we've had times, and of course this is different now because now timed outlines are approved or expected from everybody.
Right.
But I remember a time or two ago, we had somebody who, it didn't matter what the class was, the person reviewing it wanted a timed outline regardless of the time. Somebody else only wanted it when it was 4 hours or more. And so just in a logistics standpoint, there was a different expectation as depending on who you got. And so with that, I didn't know if you had any other feedback from that standpoint, or if it seems like there might seem a level of inconsistency depending on the preferences of the individual reviewing the content, or if maybe this is the first time you might have heard of something like that. I know that for us in particular, it had to do with timed outlines a time or two ago, which has already been addressed, so that's fine. But any other feedback regarding that?
Well, I mean, our aim is certainly for consistency. So, you know, this is good feedback. It's not something I haven't heard before. But I think requiring the timed course outline will resolve this to some degree. And I think, you know, there are some pains associated with growing a team as quickly as we've grown ours. And so this is helpful, again, helpful feedback for me to, you know, to address from my end. And, you know, I can do that through some different training mechanisms. And, but we've been through a lot of changes. There's been a lot of cross training. And so consistency is something that I'll take away from this meeting and help to improve.
Well, and I can also share with you, at least from our standpoint, and I think I can speak for most of us on this call, if not all of us. I mean, we all recognize we're all in the same boat. And we're all working towards the same goals at the end of the day. And so no one's trying to look for any kind of special circumstance or consideration. We just want to make sure that we're all on the same page and working in the same direction. And we appreciate everything that you do on a regular basis. And your team is great. I mean, they really are. Considering you guys have grown so quickly and have covered so much in such a short amount of time, it's impressive that you're able to do what you guys do on a regular basis. And so we appreciate you guys for sure. And if we do have any other kind of feedback individually or corporately, I'm assuming that maybe sending you an email just saying, hey, this is what we see and what we can do. What can we do to help best assist in that situation? Is okay? Yes. Okay, then we can definitely do that going forward. And so, we appreciate that. Awesome. Okay,
you guys do a great job. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
There was now another question, and it was about grandfathered brokers. I think that the understanding of what does grandfathered actually mean is question number one. And then question number two is specific to the contracts course. They're not required to take that, correct?
That's right. So I will speak to this to the extent that I can. It's my understanding that individuals were grandfathered based on a recommendation that came from the legislature in 91, I believe. And it had to do with people in, what's the opposite of dense? Minimally populated areas didn't have access to real estate CE courses. So it's my understanding that that's where the grandfathering came out of. I
think they had to be brokers too.
What's that?
They had to be brokers as well.
Right. Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, last time this was brought up a few years ago, I think we did a search of our license holders, and there really aren't. There's like a handful left that are still practicing. But no, that if somebody is CE exempt, then they won't be required to take the contracts courses either. I think right, because that was a statutory change. So I don't think we could even consider requiring that by rule. Oh, and was there a follow-up, John? What was?
No, that was pretty much it. I mean, I think you answered it. It was a history of what does grandfather brokers mean, and then also, do they have to take the contracts course? And the answer is no, because they're not required to take any education. And in addition to what you said, first of all, they had to be a broker in a very low populated area, and they had to apply within a specific amount of time. So even though they might have met all the criteria, they still had to turn in a form to be able to be those CE exempt. And you're right, they're fewer and fewer every year.
Yeah.
And pay
So we know some. Huh?
They also had to pay $100.
Right. Yeah. So there are fewer every year. But as far as, and I think admittedly there's some confusion oftentimes because you have the license holder world and you have the realtor world as well. And so we have now this new code of ethics. It's not new. Code of ethics has been around forever, but they need to take a training for that. And now if they're exempt as a license holder in Texas, they still have to take education to maintain realtor status. And so there's some confusion with that. So, but it's not the same at all. There's no grandfathering in the realtor world. Unless you're a realtor emeritus, which means you've been around forever, then they don't have to take code of ethics. But everybody else has to take it no matter what your license status is in Texas.
Right.
So
and it's my understanding that our legal update 2 historically has sometimes satisfied the code of ethics requirement, but does not this time.
That is correct. Effective January 1st of this year.
Okay. It no longer applies simply because, and it's only fair because you're meeting the needs of all license holders, and not all license holders are realtors. And so your legal 2 doesn't have the code of ethics in it. It has the canons of ethics, but that's not the same. And so the decision was made at the national level that they would no longer accept equivalence, which we had considered that to be an equivalent.
Okay,
so I'm going to jump topics really quick because I recognize we have 11 minutes and I have 2 questions. They're very similar to each other, so I'll say them at the same time.
Okay.
One is there any way we can get the direct link to what you were just looking at as far as the list of approved courses? Is there any way we can get that link? And in addition to that, do you happen to have a list on your website that is a list of the grandfathered brokers that we have access to so we know who they are? I
don't think we might have had a list on our old website years ago, but there's not one now. And you could it would probably require an open records request if you want that list.
Gotcha.
And if I copy and paste this link in the chat, will that be helpful? Or is it
actually Mike Crowley beat you to the punch, and so I think we got it now. He was sitting on top of it. So thanks, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
So let's see. Oh, there was one more question, but I think Gregory answered it for Amber out of Bryan College Station. That she was asking about how did you find the information that you were referencing about within the 90-day time frame, what education you still have to have. And you can totally see that if you're within the 90-day time frame, and if you're not, then you don't see it. And so it just magically appears within 90 days of the license renewal for that specific license when you look them up.
Right.
Got it. So I've been trying to follow the Zoom chat, and I think we've caught most of the questions. Did we miss anybody, or is there anything else that anybody has a question or comment on? Going. Okay. assuming at this point, because I don't see any fingers typing fast and furious, that you probably already exhausted all the questions that we have had so far. So Jennifer, we really, really appreciate your time, your dedication to quality education and making sure that the license holders know what they're doing to ultimately protect the consumer. We thank you for working with us to make sure that things go smoothly and well. And like you said before, the preparation ahead of time makes things move much more efficiently as time goes on. So we hope we all can continue to collaborate and work together in that initiative. So thank you for your answers and your times and being accessible to us all the time, but also just to make that presentation today. So thank you so much. We will, if it's okay with you, give your email address out because I saw that on the beginning of the slides. So we'll make sure that they have access to you in case they do have further follow-up questions, if that's okay.
And John, I'll email you the PowerPoint. I realized that I may need to just double check with General Counsel before something gets done, statewide. But I doubt there will be any problem. But I think I probably will just email that to you and let you disperse it to anybody who might want it.
Sure.
And then I also just want to say that I really appreciate everything that you guys do. And it's always been really important to me to foster that collaborative spirit. And so, you know, I hope you feel free and comfortable with accessing me or any of my team and providing feedback. And I think, you know, we work better together. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the relationship has been really good.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate your time, and thank you so much for making that presentation today, especially on a platform that is fairly new to you. And so you did a great job, by the way. It seemed fairly smooth and fairly seamless, so thank you for that. Well,
And
we
my
definitely
dogs
appreciate your
didn't
time. That is actually the most impressive of all. I haven't heard any kids falling. The internet was worked for the most part. No dogs have barked. This is actually the first meeting I think we've had so far that hasn't had some kind of catastrophe happen. And so that's pretty impressive. And I don't know if you can see the comments, but people are really appreciative of what you do. And thank you for your time today.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And everybody stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And this actually concludes our Education Invitational series that we've been doing for the course of the summer. Please be on the lookout for further feedback to see how we can better collaborate with you guys going forward. Again, if you guys have any questions for Jennifer, we'll make sure you have at least her contact information, if not also her slides. And then we're always a phone call or email away, so please always feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we can do to help with you guys. Other than that, that concludes our time. So thank you all so much, and we hope you all have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you,
Bye, Jennifer.
Bye.
Oh, hi, Gregory. Good to see you.